Hello, everybody, and welcome to the latest edition of the Royal Blue podcast. It's a very special one, of course, as we preview, I was going to say the final fixture at Goodison Park, the final men's first team fixture at Goodison Park because of events this week. So I'm joined by my colleague and Echo Everton correspondent, Joe Thomas, and regular guest, Gavin Buckland. How are you, Joe?
Yeah, very good. Cheers. Looking forward to the weekend.
Yeah. I mean, as we said, this was always going to be an historic occasion with Everton playing Southampton after 133 years at what is English football's first purpose-built football ground. But obviously, a huge announcement this week. I've not had a chance to catch up with you on this one. That the grand old lady lives. She carries on, and with the women's team and the under 21s moving in there next season. They've been saved from the bulldozers.
Yeah, the women's team moving in there. The under 21s at the moment don't have a permanent home for next season. They're probably going to be split between Bramley Moor, Goodison, Finch Farm and Walton Hall Park, depending on what their fixtures are. And I think maybe some marquee games might be held at Goodison Park, but it'll be the Everton women's home for all intents and purposes. And I think it's something that we've probably come to expect, given the direction of travel. We knew that since the Freakins had come in, that they'd conducted a feasibility study to have a look at this. And we got the news this week, and I mean, we can discuss it now. I think it's very good news, very positive news. A statement of intent. The Freakins, they like to support women's football where they can. Roma, Everton's now sister club, their female side has had a lot of success in the last few years since coming under the auspices of TFG, and we've already seen that they've put their money, to where their mouth is, essentially, to back the women's team. They signed 6 players in January, so and helped to kind of consolidate and stabilise that team. They've already confirmed new contracts for next few years for Brian Sorensen and his assistant Stephen Nelligan. So it's clear they plan to take it seriously, and I think with Goodison, that's the latest show of intent and ambition for it. I think whilst obviously it kind of, like you had that trouble there at the beginning of this intro, like trying to kind of quite, especially for us who kind of our job is to put everything into words, all of a sudden it makes a mess of that final game at Goodison and trying to add all the caveats or try and work it in. But I think it's very good news. Yeah,
because always goodbye to Goodison. Obviously it isn't now. I mean, Gav, you were. Yeah. I've noticed on the podcast when I wasn't on it last week, you were concerned talking about. Was it tractors possibly knocking over the Holy Trinity statue and things like that?
You've been saved from all that. Moment that obviously has been taken something before.
It took us down a tangent there.
I thought, it's basically what we're saying is we don't want Goodison looking like a building site, do we? Really, Yeah. And I think it's a good move. I think the stuff around women's football isn't about you need a certain capacity going forward, and it meets that. You can't help feeling though that the Freakins, being successful business people, like if there'd been a better option, a more viable option, a more financially rewarding option for them, they probably would have taken that, to be fair. But I think it's a good move. I think it means that you remove that option, don't you, of it just being laid flat, for years, and there's lots of places in the city like that, isn't there, really? So that's I think it's good news, and it's saying last time you were on talking about this, Americans look at women's football in a completely different way to what they do in this country and the rest of the world. I mean, the American women's football team is higher profile than the men's national team, and so it's got a far higher profile. And the Freakins have brought that that thinking into the club, haven't they? Really, there's a possibility, and I know you talked about it early on this week, Joe, about there's possibly advantages for PSR through this, but that's. There's a lot of hurdles to jump for that to happen, and it just seems to be like a relatively straightforward business decision that suits the club, suits the Freakins, but also gives a big boost to the women's team.
Yeah, well, there's no PSR kind of chicanery here.
No.
Or not as I'm led to understand. Not at the moment anyway. So, at the moment it seems to be just a decision that they think is for the best for everything, and I think. Obviously it's very good to show that level of support for the women's game. Of course it is, but one of the things, and this is kind of where the idea that got us onto eventually the tractors outside. I think for me one of my fears was as well as obviously being a massive boost for Everton women, and also a boost for that community as well, to keep that business, to keep Goodison there as an attraction that will still be bringing some footfall to the area, is I think one of the fears I always had about what was going to happen there is that, if Everton moved away from that site completely, for all the good intentions of things like the Goodison Legacy Project and things like that, if the stadium went and then it becomes a mixed-use development, and then I can imagine a situation where everybody starts with really good intentions, but over the years, as different buildings or different areas of the sites come under use from different people, you end up with that kind of cross purposes of no one's sure who to take responsibility for what. And you end up in a situation where I just had this horrible feeling that in 10 years' time you're just there and it's just a semi-used business site, mixed-use development, and you've got the Dixie Dean statue or the Holy Trinity statue or something like that, and they're just everything's gone a little bit tired and no one's not sure who to upkeep it for and things like that, and you almost end up with a kind of a ghost of Goodison there rather than anything else, and this should kind of help all that stuff be protected as well.
For the moment anyway. Yeah.
I mean, Joe, the concept image has also been released now, but there will be a refit, won't there, of certain elements of the stadium?
There'll be a refit. I mean, mainly internally, things like the dressing rooms obviously aren't fit. They're barely fit for purpose for the men's game anyway, but they obviously need to be adapted for the women's game as well. And then, like I wrote in my story at the time, things like the top tiers are probably going to be blocked out. It'll mainly be the lower tiers that are available to supporters. Obviously, we know that thousands of seats are going to go as part of the season ticket sale. So I think that where rows go and things like that, they might take a kind of pragmatic view to some of the seating. Where there were 24 seats, there might now be 18 or things like that, just to kind of start reducing the scale and making it a little bit more kind of adaptable and because obviously one thing that they're going to have to try and do is create an atmosphere in there, and that's going to be very difficult if you've got a 40,000 odd seater stadium there, and the women's games attendances have been growing, but I think we'd all be naive if we thought they were going to walk into a full stadium next season where we are at the moment. So they're going to have to do work to kind of help still create an atmosphere in what will be a much quieter stadium, and I think there are lots of plans to try and do things like that. So
just before we move on to the final game, I think that it has to be addressed because he's spoken this week. Sean Dyche, he started at Goodison Park's final season as manager, and he was in place until the halfway point. I mean, as anybody would do if you're talking about the job you've done, he's given his perspective on things in an interview this week, and lots of interesting lines from that one, Joe. Yeah,
lots of interesting ones. I think some of it needs to be taken with a pinch of salt. Obviously, this is a manager after the event who has his own reputation to think about. I found there are lots of things that I found interesting. Some of them kind of focus on the state of the club when he arrived and his claims that he didn't realise how big a mess he was walking into. Yeah. I have some sympathy for that because I think at the time, whilst we could see it was a mess, we're in January 2023. This is before clubs even been charged with a PSR breach, let alone gone down the line and been twice punished for it. So, there was clearly a lot that, he wouldn't have known at the time, or it sounds like he didn't know, but I am kind of treating this a little bit with caution because for all that we didn't know the depths of the mess, it was very clear that the club was in a very, very chaotic position at the time. They'd only just come from one relegation fight, which came to the last week of the season, and everyone could see what was happening. The club was performing terribly on the pitch, doomed to a second consecutive relegation fight, and the club was seething with protests about the running of the club, justified protests about the running of the club. For this lofty institution to have found itself in a position where Crystal Palace wasn't a one-off, and for all the positive words that come after it and all the never again and things like that, 6 months later everyone was in exactly the same position. So I think I've some glossing over a little bit of naivety from Sean there. Like he acknowledges in the interview that he's a firefighter. Well, there was some big fires to put out at Everton, and if he didn't know that, then I'm not sure what due diligence he was doing at the club. And then beyond that, look, like I've always maintained on here, I think he did a very good job in very difficult circumstances. I think he deserves a lot of credit for the job that he did. And I think that, if Everton go on to have the future that we hope they will do, certainly in the short to mid-term, then I think a lot of us will look back on his time as having been essential in allowing Everton to get to a point where they could enjoy a better future. That isn't to say that he didn't do things wrong, that he didn't always get his tone and his approach wrong, so he didn't always get his tone and approach right. And also I think it is possible to separate his first season and a half where he successfully fought relegation against odds to some extent, given the turbulence facing the club. I think you can separate the really good job he did there with the job that he did this season and his inability to kind of take the club on a little bit. And I still think as well, just to finish off my views on this, I still get a little bit confused about his perception that the fans had unrealistic expectations for this season. This was a common theme of things that he was saying at the time, kept alluding to this idea that because it was the last season of Goodison Everton, we're all of a sudden going to be a lot better because of the romance of the situation. Don't really remember anyone saying that. I don't remember anybody saying at the start of the season anything other than this season's about survival. Let's get through and let's hopefully enjoy the fruits of the labour afterwards. And like I say, he keeps alluding to that idea, and I don't know where he's picked that up on, because I know he speaks to fans and people in and around the club. Well, we all do as well. Yeah. And I never really heard any naivety around that.
Yeah, Gav, just before you give your thoughts on it, Emma, EFC, a regular contributor, has been on, and she said that Dyche never got the club. She's quite damning about it. Said it's never good enough to manage us. Thank God they got rid, or Sunday might have been a nervy one.
It's not good enough to manage us. Perhaps in it, like when we're on an equilibrium, and sort of perhaps where we are now, looking to push forward. But in the dark days of January 23, I mean, there was probably no better candidate, some would say, who was available. Yeah. And so and he did the job that he was. Let's face it, there's been very few Everton managers over the last decade or so who've done the job that they've been paid to do when they've come in, haven't they? Most of them have failed.
Well, you could almost make an argument that Moyes is the only manager in modern times to succeed in a row. Yeah,
Sam might disagree with that, by the way. But in terms of coming in and doing the job, I think he alluded to that in the interview. You come in, keep him up. It did. Kept him up last year. I mean, I agree with Joe. And this is the thing with Dyche, isn't it? Is he could have played. I mean, you always only hear sound about. So I heard the old interview. Is that he sort of glossed on the fact that he did do a good job in his first 18 months. Like last year, 10th, 11th. He said in the interview that what did he say? People wanted us 8th. I don't remember anybody saying that. To be honest with you, we want what we wanted to say. I think most people said is what we want to avoid is in the Goodison's final season, going into the final months where we need to win games to stay up. We just don't want that pressure. And I think, sort of he's sort of undermining himself here, because he could portray himself slightly differently, couldn't he? That came to the club, did a really good job for 18 months or so, and it happens to managers, don't they, with little money to spend, all that type of thing. Last season we fell off a little bit, but that was probably a reaction to what's gone on in the previous 18 months. I'm not sure what he mentions, and it's probably not his fault, having so many players out of contract. Yeah. And
similar
that
to
type
himself,
of stuff, Well, that's right, yeah. Didn't help, and you could paint a picture there that's largely positive of his own, performance, and ignore some of the other stuff. I mean, what he said around the points deduction, I found rather strange. About the first thing I knew about the points deduction that we were in trouble was a phone call when he was on the mid-season break. Well, I've been in the news. Don't have to watch this podcast for 9 months.
Well, that's it.
That's it. I was in the news and things like that undermine his time here, which I thought was, and we've always said this, haven't we, that in the medium to long term, you look back and think he did actually a really decent job there because of the state of the state of the club at the time, and Thowell as well. And he sort of I'd say he's undermining his own position, what he'd done. I think he's underplaying it, and he could have painted himself, from what I saw when he was talking about Everton, in a far more positive light than sort of continually go on about the mess the club was in.
Yeah, well, let's look forward now rather than backwards. And another big interview this week, Angus Kinnear, Joe, talking about his first week as CEO. I mean, what a week to come in. But yeah, lots of interesting points as well from him. And talking, I think a lot of people were impressed with the words they heard from him and the sort of vision that he seems to have for the club going forward.
Yeah, I think probably the best things here actually is just the clarity. Yeah, there's a clarity there about what it is that they're trying to do and how they want to implement it. Whether they can or not, we'll have to wait and see. And of course, look, we know not how easy, but this is something that often people in positions of high profile positions come in, they set out what they want to do. Achieving it is the difficult thing. Achieving it at a club like Everton, bearing in mind the difficulties that they've had over recent years, is tough. But he has the resources of the Freakins behind him. He has a new stadium. He has a manager that gets the club and has a history of doing well here, and he has a lot of goodwill behind him. So it's going to be a really interesting one. Look, it's clearly not ideal for Everton. So many pieces of the jigsaw are coming into place so close to the summer. And I think, I spoke about this earlier on the week, that it's also clear that there's going to be quite a significant culture shift at the club. Partly the undertakings of the Freakins, by obviously not offering Kevin Farwell a new deal. But, with his departure, we're seeing quite a number of the people that he appointed to big roles also going on their own terms, likes of James Vaughan, Dan Machis, Dan Purdy. So it's one of the things I'm finding interesting is that I'm starting to get to grips with the idea that we might never quite be able to properly judge the Kevin Farwell era, because for the last for his 3 years at the club, the turbulence at the club has always meant that there's always a caveat. You say, this signing, that signing. Yeah. If that one didn't work, you look at the limitations he's had to work with. I think in a similar way to Dyche, you can say the fact that Everton go into the new stadium as a Premier League club, despite everything that's happened off the pitch, remains, ultimately that is the biggest, the biggest thing you can take away from the thing, and it has to be a positive one. But, we've heard a lot over recent years about the kind of the restructure behind the scenes, I think it was a 108-point plan, the different pillars that he was looking to, to kind of create and strengthen Finch Farm and things like that. Well, just as we're kind of entering a period now of stability in a place where the club actually has the resource to back up some of these plans or to put some of these plans in motion, what it looks like we're going to see is the architects are all going to go, so we're never quite going to be able to judge it. So that doesn't we'll see where it goes. It's unfortunate we're in a position where probably having to scrap everything and start again. That might not be a bad thing. It might not be a bad thing just to have a fresh start with everything, and see where it goes. And like I say, Angus Kinnear, well, he speaks well, he comes across well. It was a good interview, and I think we all liked hearing what he had to say. And now he's obviously got to deliver. So,
I mean, Gav, he was all very sort of positive. He was talking about how he liked teams who took a risk, and he felt that Everton have been underachieving now, and it was a chance. He said, he name checked the likes of Crystal Palace who are in the FA Cup final, Nottingham Forest pushing for Europe. Well, have qualified for Europe now this season, and he's looking to overtake clubs like that for starters.
That just shows how far we've dropped, isn't it? Really, I wouldn't necessarily think that's that's damning us with faint praise, that isn't it? Really, that clubs that actually we would be a couple of levels above even the end of Moyes' time. We're now sort of looking up to them as trying to aspire to them. By the way, that's not to give respect to them, because both clubs have done brilliantly, haven't they? Really, so I'm not really criticising clubs per se. I'm just saying that if we're below, then that just shows you where we are. And I think going back to Joe's point, but that goes to football is short term, isn't it, Joe? How can we talk about clubs having a long term vision and all this type of stuff? How many clubs actually go on and achieve that? I mean, for me, his key performance indicator was keeping us within PSR. After from the years before he came, caused the breach. We retained, our position in the Premier League, and look as though we're going to stay out of PSR trouble for a couple of years. That, to me, as the director of football, that was his role, really, to be honest with you, trade and stuff, which we did quite imaginatively at the end of last season. So that's the way I'd view it. But I think it's very difficult, isn't it, to say about anybody in football what's in the long term, what have they done? Because, it's short termism, isn't it, all the time? And I think I haven't liked the Dice one. I've only seen the sound bites from the Kinnear thing, but it's good that people are coming in with different perspectives, isn't it? That are not sort of bloodied by the past, and which a lot of people within the club over the last 4 or 5 years have been like that. And so it's good to have a whole raft of people coming in, as I say, who are not damaged by being involved in Everton and taking us forward. And I think hopefully that will transmit itself when we go to Brandymore and the fan base and so on. It will be a distinctly different place to what it was, say, when Dice come over and come here in January 23. Ironically, after the Southampton game, wasn't it? Really,
Carlos Alcaraz's debut for Southampton.
Yeah, was it? Yeah.
Right.
And so it's very difficult. I will always look back on Dice and Thelwell, I think, as if you said, did they do a good job, yes or no? I'd say yes, to be fair.
Okay.
And I'd actually say a very good yes, to be honest with you, as much as it probably, it may not be the common view, but I think if you have a look where we were in January 23 to keep us up and, last season to keep us out of trouble, I think they did a good job.
Yeah, so if we move to actually Everton Southampton May 2025 now, I've just been quite taken aback by this comment from Liam. Weather's looking great. I'm going to get my royal blue mankini out for Sunday, I think. Just got to get a message telling me that the day starts at 7 a.m, so probably going to be a bit worse for wear by kickoff. Joe, it is going to be a long day. There's so much going on and off the pitch. And as Liam alludes to there, Mankini's apart. I mean, it's going to be an amazing spectacle, isn't it?
Well, it's going to be an emotional one. I don't think there's any doubt about that. So, I think, looking forward to it. Obviously, it's been a long time coming now, hasn't it? So, kind of... Yeah, it's gonna be a long day. Looking forward to obviously the coach welcome and the early start, and just hope they can I hope there's a centerpiece in the middle of it. The game goes all right because that's it. I hope we get to finish it off with a win because that would be nice. Obviously, have massive implications for the race for 13th, which Everton are in a pretty strong position for all of a sudden. And if results go the right way tonight with Spurs and Man United, if Spurs lose, Everton are guaranteed to finish above them for a start. So which feels slightly mad, but it's going to be a long day, but it should hopefully be a fun day. I think that the news, the confirmation that the women's team are going to move into Goodison kind of changes the dynamic of it a little bit. Because I think that a lot of the there was going to be an element of the day which would almost be slightly mournful because everybody would be saying their final goodbyes, and obviously I know they will be saying their final goodbyes to Goodison in its current incarnation, and watching senior men's team football there and things like that. But clearly there'll be the opportunity for and I would encourage people to do this, to go back to Goodison to watch football again next season and the seasons after that as well. So if anything, I think that should almost make it even a better an occasion on Sunday, because it is the beginning of the end, beginning of an end, and the past of Goodison should be celebrated and deserves to be celebrated, but it is also should be a celebration of the start of two new beginnings now, two hopefully new, bright, exciting, prosperous visions of Everton moving to brilliant new stadium on the docks, and hopefully now having the wherewithal to be able to compete at a much better level. And obviously Everton women taken to Goodison, being the avant-garde of the women's game, and hopefully being able to push on and push up the table and be more competitive, and hopefully continue to motivate and inspire new audiences to come and enjoy the game and to take up football as well. And having Goodison as a vehicle to be able to do that is such an incredibly powerful tool for Everton women, and that's something that I think the whole of Merseyside should be able to get behind because of what it means and the potential it brings.
I mean, Gav, you've already said you agree it feels different now, and I think Joe and a few people have already said, a celebration, a party now rather than a wake, and that there's a change in the dynamic.
You read my WhatsApp.
I just said, as Joe and others have said. Somebody else said it before you. I won't say who that was.
I think...
you still put it in, Joe.
Yeah. I think it takes away the sadness, is that the phrase? Perhaps a little bit, That, to be fair, though, is that a good thing? I'm not sure. I mean, that's part of the human emotion, isn't it? That's something to look back on. I think it does change it, ultimately. It's different. I wouldn't say it makes it better, apart from maybe it does make it a bit more of a happy occasion, because you will have the chance to go back. But it does seem like a different vibe, isn't it, for want of a better phrase, going forward with the two grounds than just the one. You can't see the other ground again. And but it'll still be good occasion, though, won't it? I mean, all the stuff this week, you're celebrating. What you're doing is you're celebrating what's gone on the pitch over the last 100 and whatever it is years, rather than the end of the ground, as it were. Yeah, so I think it changes it. I wouldn't say it makes it different, and I think it will be possibly a happy occasion for, as a result of that, really, Chris.
Yeah, I mean, Joe David Moyes has been very sort of adamant about this. He's drilling it into the players. This is the most important game of the season. He wants them to be ready for this. I mean, some people said, "Oh, wouldn't it be Everton if they slipped up against Southampton?" I mean, Southampton have now they've avoided the sort of the humiliation of being the worst ever Premier League side from a statistical point of view with that point against Manchester City last week. But you've got to be hopeful that Everton can do the business against this Southampton side, surely.
Beating Everton twice, haven't they? That's a quarter
Sean
of their
Dyche's
points.
Everton,
A quarter of their points have come against Everton, haven't they? And so, I mean, it's just ridiculous, isn't it? Oh, God, that's a grim old day at St. Mary's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Hopefully. And this is where I think that you can see the difference between a Dyche and a Moyes. Emma commented earlier saying that she thought that Sean Dyche didn't quite get Everton, and I think that's a fair conclusion to take. He said a lot of the right things, but for whatever reason, they never quite seem to resonate with the fan base. And I think he has to take a degree of responsibility for that. Somebody who doesn't have that problem more is obviously David Moyes. We know he cares deeply about the club, about the ground, about the fans. Only had to go to I was there at Goodison on Monday night for the Everton Heritage Society's Dixie Dean Memorial Award, and you got Moyes there. Everything that he's got to manage at the minute, expiring contracts, transfers, planning for Southampton, and all that, and him and Alan Irvine were down there to present the award to Derek Temple, and it's just little things like that which just show that it's not a veneer. This isn't superficial. The love is there and it runs deep, isn't it? So, and it helps him to kind of understand the occasion of things like this. So I don't think that the players will go into this game short of any awareness of how important it is. It's then up to them to deliver. So.
Yeah. Are you expecting a big display from the Blue Boys, Gav?
It's a big display from Moyes, you're going to say there. Yeah. I don't think Moyes does superficial, does he?
No.
I think he's the last person you would apply that to. Yeah, I think so. I've got, not to spoil the party, I've got, not the best memories of last home games of the season against Southampton, shall we say. Right.
Well, they still got a big win, though, didn't they?
Oh, yeah. Of course, we've got contractually obliged to say that I think our two biggest by winning margins in the top flight at Goodison. One was against Manchester City 9-1. Imagine beating Man City 9-1 now. And the other one was beating Southampton 8-0 in 1971-72.
Couldn't cope.
Which is my first season of going. And it was also lad who's best man, who's a great mate. It was his first game. Yeah. So there was a few people his first game, so there's 8-0 that I know.
You think it was like that every week?
Yeah. And the 71-72 season, you wouldn't think it was the same week. So mixed memories of Southampton home games, to be fair, but I just missed that. I started going about a month after the 8-0. But we've got
Glory Hunter.
Glory Hunter, yeah, absolutely. There's people out there.
Have a minute of that.
There's people out there who think I started going halfway through the 84-85 season, by the way. But no. But I think it's I get the thing about Moyes does understand this type of thing, and I don't think that's necessarily because he's got enormous experience in managing Everton. I just think that's the type of person he is. Mm-hmm. I don't think But what Joe's talking about there is not necessarily about because he's been at the club, obviously 11, 12 years, and he's come back again and he's been around the Premier League in that intervening period. I think it's because he just gets it. Mm-hmm. He understands, and he's got the emotional intelligence to understand the supporters, something that he tapped into on his first day in the job, didn't he? So, I think he'll be revving the players up. He'll understand the occasion, and I think we've got enough in the bag to win, haven't we? Really, and it could be an important win in terms of the points race and prize money and stuff. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to it, and hopefully go out with a bang. To be fair,
yeah. I mean, Joe, you're obviously heading up to Finch Farm this afternoon, 1:30 for David Moyes pre-match press conference. But if we actually come to the predictions now, what we're going to go for the final men's first team game at Goodison Park, Everton Southampton. What do you reckon, Joe?
Yeah, well, just going back to the occasion, he should have enough in the tank, and I think as well that what might help will be one of the things that's perhaps been a difficult factor over recent weeks is I think quite a lot of the players now, obviously we know there are a lot with uncertain futures. I think most of them are getting to a point now where they understand where their future is going to be. Obviously, there'll be more on that in the the next few days. So I think I think Moyes was always keen for people to know their situation going into Southampton, so that they would then have the opportunity for those who were going to leave to know that it was their last day at home, last home game. And I think we're moving towards a position where most of them will know that. So, rather than those players perhaps playing with their uncertainty and things like that, there'll be people that can perhaps enjoy the emotion of the occasion like us, because some of them will be saying goodbye, or, they'll know that they're going to be saying goodbye. So I think that's all going to be, add to it as well. Obviously, the big one to watch for everyone is Seamus Coleman. I asked Moyes after the Fulham game whether he'd had any thoughts about Coleman, the big occasion. I mean, he obviously came on at the end of the Fulham game.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised not to see him lead the team out, regardless of what he's doing in the future. But we'll have to wait and see on that. But yeah, I think everyone will have enough to have it in the tank. I think the important thing for Everton tomorrow, and I think Moyes will probably drill this into the players, is to start quick. Because if they start quick and get an early goal, and all of a sudden, you can see Southampton turn up and having the loose desire to spoil the party, or obviously just to play for professional pride. Yeah. But the minute that, if they turn up and Everton are just going at 150% and go, Beto bundles one in after 5 minutes, and you can very quickly see a scenario in which the game will open up for Everton. So if they can win it in the first, they could possibly win it in the first 15, 20 minutes and make the afternoon much better for everybody. So hopefully they'll do that. And I think they will. I think they'll win 3-0. I think
3-0.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, we had the blip with Ipswich. I spoke to so many people before that game out and around the ground, because obviously so many people are making it. That was their last game. Yeah. And actually bumped into an American supporter who'd come over, and it was his first game at Goodison. He got to Ipswich for his first game. I remember sitting in the stands at 2-0 thinking, he's had an absolute world here. Sun shining, Goodison amazing, brilliant 1878's display, 2-0 up. And then by the end of it, I thought he's had the proper Everton experience. Actually. Yeah. Hopefully they got that out of their system then, and we can.
Good game to go to, the Ipswich game, wasn't it? In terms of the ground, looked lovely. It was lovely.
I still wonder whether there might be a lot of us who look back on Ipswich as the kind of the
last proper game.
The one that when we look back on this season, we go, that's where my memory lies. Obviously Sunday's going to be a huge occasion, but we all go into it knowing that it's going to be a huge occasion, probably all putting ourselves under a degree of pressure to try and make the most of it, and then all of a sudden it becomes a lot harder to do it because you.
Yeah, I've always said that, haven't I? Over the last couple of months is it's your own personal experience to maximise that. Is it's best to do that and not go to the final game. Is just to and I think a lot of people did that at Ipswich. You could just tell, couldn't you? I think we're saying the last time we were talking about this that somebody said at the Ipswich game that the final game would be like New Year's Eve, where you can't really celebrate New Year's Eve because you're overcome by the emotion of everybody else celebrating. You sort of get lost within that, and it doesn't give you the time to personally reflect on things. And I think if your last game, more by accident, the design had been before before Southampton, I think you would have had an opportunity to maximise that personal experience. This is just about me, my emotions, about Goodison, where I think that would be very difficult on the last home game of the season, to be honest with you. You'd be okay, you'd be celebrating something else. You'd be celebrating the end of Goodison rather than your final game at Goodison for the men's team, obviously. Senior team. So, it's an interesting, nearly happened there, didn't it? Yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it, really? But I think we've got enough in the tank to get us over the line. A fast start. I think I'd go with 3-0. It reminds me, talking about Coleman, and you would have read this, Chris, in the last book I was talking about Kevin Ratcliffe's last season, which is 91-92. And he wanted to play the final home game against, I think it was Chelsea. And Howard refused. Yeah.
Ruthless like that.
Yeah. He played David Dunsworth, who was 18 at left back. If you think everything that Ratcliffe had done for Howard and the club, he strange way, Howard, in that he could be pretty ruthless and a little bit more than that with players who'd really served him well, the likes of Sharp, Sheedy, Southall eventually, Ratcliffe. He had a strange way of being pretty brutal and a bit beyond that, really, with them. And I know there's less options for Howard in 92. He's only had one sub, but Moyes has cut from a slightly different cloth. And I think, even though we might want to maximise points on Sunday, I think he'll, I wouldn't be surprised Coleman leading the team out on Sunday, because Moyes will understand that within the context of the final game. And that's somebody you interviewed this week, Chris.
We'll come on to that. Yeah, you've both gone for 3-0. I was hoping that Everton get a big win. I'll top you both then, and I'll say 4-0 Everton. Go for it. You don't tend to get like the 6-0s anymore and stuff like that. So I go 4-0 Everton. I think that that'd be my prediction. But I think a lot of it does depend on, like as Joe said, that how fast you start. If you get an early goal,
it would be interesting to see if you score on Sunday, right? Okay. Would you want anybody else to score after you?
You got that dynamic.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Would you?
That's awful, that Gav.
Human
nature, maybe.
That's human nature, you read books about players who've been substitute when they've been dropped, and they say, I wanted the person who's replaced me to be awful because it meant, to get back in the team. So players are like that, aren't they? And it would go through somebody's mind. And definitely, if you
let's
score
not
on
end
Sunday.
133 years of men's first team football at Goodison Park with thoughts like this, Gav.
What I'm saying is that would seriously. You would think that as fans, watching, I wonder if that's the last goal we'll see at Goodison Park, that type of thing.
Well, I was also saying after the Ipswich game is the incentive as well to go in front of the Gladys Street as well, isn't it? So that's not the last goal. So you agree with me then,
in
front of the Gladys Street.
Just be interesting to see. Imagine if you had the penalty the last minute to be about 11 players fighting overtaking.
Let Jordan Pickford take that.
Hey. That's a shout.
Yeah.
No, that's a good thing. It's a thing. It's a historical thing, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
It's bad.
Yeah, so Joe's heading up to Finch Farm, so stick with us for the live blog for that one. As Gav has pointed out, we've actually done 2, to be fair, haven't we, Gav? Because it was the 40th anniversary of Everton's only European trophy
so far.
Week. They Rapid Vienna in 1985 in Rotterdam. So we had Gav, and Gav's mate Fingers came in for that one as well. So look out for that one.
Just on I wrote this in my notebook today, but you seen a Rapid Vienna brought out a run of memorial merchandise to mark the 40 years themselves.
Okay, so they got beat. Okay, fair enough.
We had some Rapid Vienna cap in the studio with us on when we got on the night.
Look, it was definitely a bona fide one, wasn't it? Yeah. And of course, as Gav's kindly mentioned there, the final episode of Goodison Park, My Home, speak to the current captain, Seamus Coleman. Obviously, we started 14 months ago at a pub in Christleton with Kevin Ratcliffe.
Was that 14 months ago? Was it?
March last year. Everton's most successful skipper, so I thought it was nice to come full circle, finish with Shaman actually at the Grand Old Lady herself, so that one's out too. So plenty of great content to go around that one. And I know Ian's recorded another nostalgia special with Paul Wheelock, which is coming out next week, so plenty to keep us busy there on the Royal Blue podcast. But thanks to Joe and thanks to Gav. I've been your host, Chris Beesley, and this has been the Goodison End of an Era episode for the Royal Blue podcast.